Welcome back for episode 3 of Disturbing Lost Media, a series where I cover not safe for life lost media, some of which is probably better off staying lost. I'd like to give a shout out to the Lost Media Wiki, as most of the entries in this video were found on there, and it's an excellent collection of various types of lost media, so it was very useful as a starting point for researching for this video. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. This video will contain vague discussions of topics that some might find distressing, including murder and death. Viewer discretion is advised. You can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to watch an uncut version of this video, which features a whole extra entry that was unsuitable for this cut. On New Year's Eve in 2002, the Vancouver Police Department received a letter from an anonymous individual admitting responsibility for the death of an unnamed woman who was described as Caucasian with long black curly hair. The writer stated that she had no ID and they couldn't remember the name she gave them, but investigators believe they were referring to 24 or 25-year-old Danielle Marissa Lynn LaRue, an Indigenous woman from the Neskonlith Indian band within British Columbia. She had used a variety of names throughout her life, including the first names Bambi, Boo, Bucci, Butchie, Corey, Danielle Marie, Kimberly Ann, Louie, Rosie, and the surnames Dick, Felix, Nick, and Nooske. She also had the nickname Holy Smoke. Danielle had a really hard life from start to finish. There are few details about what exactly happened, and this whole case in general, but apparently she was physically abused and SA'd as a child. Her sister said she was abused in every way a child could be. She was placed in foster care at a young age and still did her best to protect her younger brother and sister, even kidnapping them when she was just 10 to rescue them from a particularly abusive home they were in. At the age of 13 or 14, she ran away from northern British Columbia and headed to the Prince George area where she became addicted to heroin, presumably as a way of coping with the pain of everything that had happened to her, and she turned to work on the streets to fund her addiction. She only ever had one real boyfriend when she was 16, who beat her, robbed her, and ensured she stayed addicted to drugs, yet she still loved him, and after they broke up, she was involved with others, but would always get bored of them eventually. Danielle's sister Kim had also followed a similar path to her, became addicted to heroin, got into sex work, and spent some time in prison, where she felt relatively safe because of Danielle's reputation. No one wanted to mess with her. She told the Vancouver Sun, "For me and Danielle, institutions are like home. We don't want to be there, but you get 3 regular meals, you have a place to sleep, you see your friends, play some games, and get your health back up before you go back to drugs and the street. Because when you get out, it's usually on the bus and straight back to downtown." Thankfully, Kim was in a methadone program and had a good job by the time she did this interview in 2008, and was committed to staying that way for her 4 children, who were apparently doing well in safe foster homes. As for their brother, he had more than 18 convictions by the age of 19, and committed his most serious in December 2000, which resulted in an aggravated SA conviction. The article doesn't clarify what happened to him after that. Danielle's father Norman, who had been abusive to their mother, died of a heroin overdose in February 2000 at the age of 59. After their mother died of cancer in 1995, Danielle moved to Vancouver and had been living in the downtown Eastside area for around 5 years when she disappeared sometime around November 2002. The exact date is unknown, as she had little contact with her family prior to her disappearance. Kim said that she knew Danielle would never come back when she moved to that area. Quote, Everybody knew that once you went to the downtown east side, you were done. You were either going to be dead or in jail. Those were the only exits you had. It's like a big black pit with stabbings, murders, and ODs. It's crazy down there. Nobody cares about anybody but themselves and their next fix. The few details given in the letter are the only details known about Danielle's disappearance, and half of the letter has been blacked out and not shared with the public. I'll read what has been released now. To police. I sent message about this to Vancouver police a few days after incident, but have seen nothing in the news about it. I'm guessing they either didn't receive it or can't match info to victim, so here is letter again with additional information. This is about Vancouver prostitute who disappeared at end of November 2002. Don't remember name she gave me, had no ID. Sounded like she had just recently come to Vancouver. Caucasian, long black curly hair, jeans, black leather jacket, tattoos and jewellery. She is dead. I send this info so you can notify her family. If you can, please make mention of her name in Vancouver Sun. I would like to know who she was. To her family, I am more sorry for this than you can imagine. I did not intend this, but I'm still responsible. Wish I could take it back, but can't. She will not be unmourned. I've brought flowers to her grave once already, plan to do so every year as I'm able. Not ideal, but better than no visits at all. I know you can't forgive me, but please believe I tried my very hardest to bring her back. It's not exactly clear why parts of this letter were redacted. Perhaps they contained graphic details that police thought were unnecessary to share, or maybe they chose to hide those details so if they ever found whoever wrote this letter, they could verify it was them. I assume there were some details that further suggested the letter was referring to Danielle because the description of Caucasian, long black curly hair, jeans, black leather jacket, tattoos and jewellery could literally be anyone. Unfortunately, in dangerous areas like this, people go missing all the time, and it's not uncommon for no one to even realise they're gone, so I'm not sure how anyone would put two and two together and realise the letter was about Danielle without more information. The letter itself is just bizarre. If it's to be believed, then it gives some closure by making it known that she is no longer alive, but it doesn't answer many questions related to her death. Given the fact that she was addicted to heroin, I'd maybe assume that she OD'd, especially considering the writer says that they tried their very hardest to bring her back, but they claim they are responsible, implying that despite their remorse, it wasn't an accident. I guess it's possible that they supplied the drugs, but it can be inferred from the letter that the writer buried Danielle after her death, considering they talk about taking flowers to her grave. Would someone go to such lengths to hide the body of someone who was already addicted to drugs who died of an OD? Perhaps, if the drugs were dodgy. It just seems like a bit of a stretch though if the death was totally accidental, unless the writer is placing more blame on themselves than would be reasonable for her cause of death. Given that they don't know Danielle's name, I assume they weren't friends and that the writer didn't know her well, so it seems plausible that they were one of her clients, in which case I wonder if they somehow accidentally killed her while she was providing her service, so to speak. Maybe it was rough and things got out of hand, but things would have to get very out of hand for her to have died in that way. I guess it's possible that the writer didn't know Danielle at all. Perhaps they hit her with their car and couldn't save her, though the part where they say, sounded like she had just recently come to Vancouver, makes it sound like they at least had a conversation. It's really hard to speculate further without more information. I suspect the redacted parts of the letter at least hint at her cause of death, but considering those parts haven't been publicised in the 21 years after it happened, I doubt there will be a reason to in the future. The writer also claims to have sent another letter to police prior to this one. It's unclear whether they even received it, and regardless, none of it has ever been shared publicly, so its contents are unknown. I find this case so depressing. Not only because a woman died before she ever really got a chance to live, but because it seems that her sister is the only person that will remember her. After such a traumatic upbringing, it seems that Danielle just fell through the cracks. No one cared that she ran away and went down such a dangerous path. Her parents clearly never cared about any of their kids that much in the first place. Both of them died before Danielle went missing, and since then there are only a handful of sources online to indicate that she ever even existed. There are next to no details about her disappearance or death, and while an investigation was launched to determine what happened, it doesn't seem to have led anywhere. I can't help but assume that her case file is just sitting in a drawer somewhere gathering dust, having not been touched in over 20 years. Whoever wrote the letter clearly has remorse for whatever they did to cause her death, and that gives me some hope that one day the guilt might get too much and they'll turn themselves in, or at least reveal the location of Danielle's body so that her sister can have some closure. Raymond Lavern Roach, born in February 1925, was a boxer from Plainview, Texas, who first put on a pair of gloves at just 10 years old and turned professional while serving in the US Marines. From around the age of 20, his career took off and he won 23 of his 24 fights, with an 18-fight win streak. In 1947, he was Ring Magazine's Rookie of the Year, and it seemed like he had a very successful career ahead of him. That was until it all came to an end in 1950. Around 18 months prior, Lavern had decided to retire and start a tyre repair and insurance business after 2 further losses followed his loss against Marcel Cerdan. In this match, Lavern initially seemed to have the upper hand until the second round when he was knocked down by Marcel and managed to get up at the count of 9. He was knocked down twice more in that round and was subject to heavy body blows by Marcel in rounds 3 and 4. Lavern fought a little better in the 5th round before Marcel dominated again in the 6th. Again, Lavern made somewhat of a comeback in round 7 and the start of round 8, but it was short-lived as Marcel floored him twice more. Lavern somehow managed to get up again, though he wasn't looking good, and after he was knocked down once again, the match was stopped and Marcel was declared the winner. After the match, Marcel said, "Roach has guts. I have never hit so much and so hard." Lavern admitted that he never recovered from the first knockdown, stating that he knew what he was doing afterwards, but that the balance had abandoned him. Because this match was televised before videotape was perfected, the footage was not available to watch after the live broadcast, and only photos of the match exist now. So this is lost media in itself, but not the main one we'll be covering in this entry. When Lavern came out of retirement in March 1950, he won his next 3 matches against Johnny Crosby, Georgie LaRover, and then Jimmy Taylor, and was set to fight Georgie Small on the 22nd of February, which would be Lavern's 25th birthday. It took place at the St. Nicholas Arena in New York, in front of an audience of over 1,800 people, and received coverage from the CBS network, broadcasting the fight to millions of viewers. It was scheduled for 10 rounds, and Lavern had dominated most of the rounds, with judges stating by the 8th round that he was winning 6-3, but the tide suddenly turned in the next round. Ted Sayers, a prolific boxing writer, described what happened in an article on badlefthook.com in 2010, quote, "Roach was well ahead in the fight and seemingly on his way to an easy points win. His reward would be a match with Sugar Ray Robinson. Suddenly, Small uncocked a desperation shot in the 8th stanza that landed squarely on the ex-Marine's jaw. It was a right-hand blow. The tide of the fight changed just like that. The blow ripped into Roach like a sledgehammer, and the blood immediately gushed from his lips and mouth. Bleeding profusely and staggering, he managed to hang on until the bell rang. While he somehow made it through the 9th using every survival trick he knew, he was a bloody mess, and the one-sided assault continued through the 10th until another crunching right put Roach down like he had been sapped. Everyone in our house, my dad, my friends, started to scream, 'Stop it, stop it.' Little did I know at the time that I would repeat this scream many times in the future. The fans at ringside were doing the same, and referee Frank Fulham did just that, but just as he did, another shot sent Roach sprawling. Unfortunately, the damage had already been done. As Lavern lay glassy-eyed on the blood-splattered canvas, he motioned that he was okay, but he was anything but. All of a sudden, he went slack-eyed and unconscious. We all said, "Oh no," because our instincts told us that something very bad was happening. The raw-boned Texan quickly lapsed into a coma. 14 hours later, Lavern Roach, just 24, passed away from a subdural hemorrhage in St. Clair's Hospital. Doctors had tried to revive Lavern in the ring, but it seemed that his fate was already sealed before that final hit, and his last words were, "My luck is running out." Prior to his death, Lavern had been experiencing nose pains, and an autopsy determined that these were not linked to his death. However, the fight against Marcel Sedan 2 years earlier may have contributed to it. Many already believed that he hadn't fully recovered, despite him insisting otherwise, and the fact that he was cleared in 6 examinations prior to the match. A full investigation was launched by the New York State Athletic Commission that ultimately determined that Lavern's death was accidental, and Georgie, who claimed he didn't realise the extent of the damage inflicted on Lavern, faced no charges. The incident resulted in various reforms, including more extensive medical screenings and more consideration regarding damage caused by previous fights. As for Georgie, that fateful fight was the beginning of the end of his career. He continued boxing until 1955, but most top boxers refused to fight him, and he was understandably racked with guilt afterwards. Years later, he told True magazine, "I wanted to be a fighter. All my whole life I wanted to be a fighter, and see what happened. I'm broke and sick. I got my wife broke. I ruined everything. I guess the only thing I ever did in my whole life was kill a friend." The incident was the first ever televised boxing match that ended with the death of one of the competitors, though it's thought that none of the footage exists today. For the same reason as the match between Lavern and Marcel, it occurred before videotaping was widespread. Only one photo of the match is known to exist, and it shows Georgie hitting Lavern in the back of the head shortly before he was knocked down twice. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, plus any suggestions you might have for the next episode of Disturbing Lost Media. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday in a new video.